Were there postmen then, too?
With sprinkling eyes and wind-cherried noses, on spread frozen feet, they crouched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully. But all that the children could hear was a ringing of bells.
You mean that the postman went rat-a-tat-tat and the doors rang?
I mean that the bells that the children could hear were inside them.
Oh, I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells.
There were church bells, too.
Inside them?
No. In the black snow-white belfries. They rang their tidings over the bandaged town, over the crackling sea. It seemed that all the churches boomed for joy under my window.
And the weathercocks crew for Christmas on our fence.
Get back to the postman.
We were just ordinary postmen, fond of walking, and dogs, and Christmas, and the snow. We knocked on the doors with blue knuckles.
Ours has got a black knocker.
And then we stood at the white welcome mat and the little drifting porches and huffed and puffed, making ghosts with our breath, and jogged from foot to foot like small boys wanting to go out.
And then the presents?
And then the presents.
And the cold postman with a rose on his button nose tingled down the tea-tray slithered run of the tea.
He wagged his bag like a frozen camel's hump, dizzily turned the corner on one foot, and by God, he was gone.
Get back to the presents.
There were the useful presents. Mittens made from giant sloths.
Oh, blinding tam-o'-shanterns and bunny-suited busties.
And balaclavas for victims of head-shrinking tribes.
Vermonts, who always wore wool. There were mustached and rasping vests.
It made you wonder why they had any skin left at all.
And once, I had a little crotcheted nose bag from an aunt now, alas, no longer whinnying with us.
And pictureless books in which small boys, though warned with quotations not to, would skate on Farmer Giles's pond, and did, and drowned.
And books that told me everything about the wasp. Except why.
We'll go on to the useless presents.
Bags of moist and many-colored jelly babies.
And a false nose, and a tram conductor's cap.
And a machine that punched tickets and rang a bell.
Once, by mistake that no one could explain, a little hatchet.
And a celluloid duck that made, when you pressed it, a most unduck-like sound.
A mewing moo that an ambitious cat might make who wished to be a cow.
And a painting book in which I could make the grass, the trees, and the sea, and the animals any color I pleased. And still, the sky blue sheep are grazing the red field under the rainbow bill and pea-green birds.
Hard boils, toffee,
Fudge and all sorts.
Crunches, cracknels.
A mug.
Glaciers.
Marzipan.
And butter Welsh for the Welsh.
And snakes and families and happy ladders.
And a whistle to make the dogs bark, to wake up the old man next door, to make him beat on the wall with his stick to shake our picture off the wall.
And a packet of cigarettes. You put one in your mouth, and you stood at the corner of the street and waited for hours in vain for an old woman to scold you for smoking a cigarette. And then, with a smirk, you ate it.
and on Christmas mornings, with dog-disturbing whistle and sugar fags, I would scour the swatched town for the news of the little world.
And find always a dead bird by the white post office, or by the deserted swings.
Perhaps a robin, all with one of his fires out.
Men and women waiting or scooping back from chapel with taproom noses, wind-bust cheeks, all-round binos, huddled their stiff black jarring feathers against the irreligious snow.
Then, out of a snow-clogged side lane, would come a boy, the spit of myself, with a pink-tipped cigarette and the violet cast of a black eye, cocky as a bullfinch, leering all to himself. I hated him on sight and sound, and would be about to put my dog biscuit to my lips and blow him off the face of Christmas, when suddenly he, with a violet wing, put his whistle to his lips and blew so stridently, so high, so exquisitely loud.
And gobbling faces would press against their tinseled windows, the whole length of the white echoing streets.
Then I would be slap-dashing home. The gravy smell of the dinners of others.
The bird smell, the brandy.
For pudding and mince.
For dinner we had turkey and blazing pudding.
A mistletoe hung from the gas brackets.
There was sherry and walnuts and bottled beer.
And crackers by the dessert spoons. Hats in their fur belts watch the fires, and the high heat fire spat.
Were there uncles like in our house?
There are always uncles at Christmas.
The same uncles.
We sat in the parlors trying on new cigars,
Holding them out at arm's length, returning them to our mouths,
coughing, then pulling them out again.
as though waiting for the explosion.
Some few small aunts not wanted in the kitchen.
Nor anywhere else, for that matter.
Sat on the very edges of our chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break, like faded cups and saucers.
And after dinner, the uncles sat in front of the fire, loosened all buttons, groaned a little, and slept.
Auntie Bessie, who had already been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, whimpered at the sideboard and had some elderberry wine.
The cat was sick in the kitchen.
Auntie Nosy had to have 3 aspirins.
But Auntie Hannah, who liked port, stood in the middle of the snowbound backyard, singing like a big bosom thrush.
I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up too.
And when they burst,
Which they all did.
The uncles jumped and rumbled.
In the rich and heavy afternoon, I would sit among festoons, Chinese lanterns,
And tried to make a model man-of-war following instructions for little engineers and produce what might be mistaken for
a seagoing tram car.
Or I would go out, my bright new boots squeaking into the white world on the seaward hill to call on Jim and Dad and Jack.
And to pad through the still streets, leaving huge, deep footprints in the hidden pavements.
I bet people will think there's been hippos.
What would you do if you saw a hippo coming down our street?
Well, I'd go like this. Bang! And I'd throw him over the railings, and I'd roll him down the hill, and I'd tickle him under his ear, and he'd wag his tail.
What would you do if you saw 2 hippos?
Iron-flanked and bellowing he-hippos clanked and battered through the scudding snow toward us as we passed Mr. Daniel's house.
Let's post Mr. Daniel a snowball through his letterbox.
Let's write things in the snow.
Let's write, Mr. Daniel looks like a spaniel all over his lawn.
Now we were snowblind travelers, lost on the North Hills, and vast dewlapped dogs with flasks around their necks ambled and shambled up to us, baying, "Excelsior!"
We returned home through the poor streets, where only a few children fumbled with bare red fingers in the wheel-rutted snow, and catcalled after us, their voices fading away as we trudged uphill, into the cries of the dock-birds and the shooting of ships out in the whirling bay. And then, at tea, the recovered uncles would be jolly.
Auntie Hannah laced her tea with rum.
Because it was only once a year.
Bring out the tall tales now, that we told by the fire, as the gaslight bubbled like a diver. Ghosts wooed like owls in the long nights when I dared not look over my shoulder.
Animals lurked in the cubby hole under the stairs.
I remember that we went singing carols once, and there wasn't the shading of a moon to light the flying streets.
At the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house.
And we stumbled up the darkness of the drive that night, each one of us afraid.
Each one of us holding a stone in his hand.
And all of us too brave to say a word.
The wind in the trees made noises as of old and unpleasant, and maybe web-footed men wheezing in caves.
We reached the black bulk of the house.
What shall we give them?
Hark the herald?
No, good King Wenceslas.
Okay, I'll count 3. 1, 2, 3.
And we began to sing, our voices high and seemingly distant in the snow-felted darkness round the house that was occupied by...
Nobody we knew.
We stood close together near the dark door.
And then, a small, dry voice, like the voice of someone who has not spoken for a long time, joined our singing. A small, dry, eggshell voice from the other side of the door. A small, dry
when we stopped running, we were outside our house.
Perhaps it was a ghost. Perhaps it was trolls.
Let's go in and see if there's any jelly left.
And we did that.
Always on Christmas night, there was music.